So you've just gone open source with Blue Dragon J2EE, and what does that mean for you at New Atlanta?
What we're trying to do with the open source version, I guess, just to back up, we've been in business with Blue Dragon for 6 years,
yeah.
selling Blue Dragon as a commercial product. We first announced it in March of 2002.
Yeah.
Since that time, we've grown a very good base of customers, of paying customers for the commercial products. And so what we want to do with the open source version is create a community of users and create, hopefully a large community of users for the open source version that's going to do two things. It's going to give us feedback on the product. The more people who use the product, the more feedback that we'll get on the types of features and the types of future development that people would like to see. And then hopefully that user community then forms a base of potential customers for the commercial products, because we do intend to continue to develop and support the commercial products. We are a commercial entity, and we are in this business to make money. And so our goal is very similar. I think there's two analogies that you can draw to what we're trying to do. We've looked at companies and different business models, and I think MySQL is probably the most directly relevant. If you go to MySQL's website, they have a open source version that they call the Community Edition that is released under GPL license, which is the same license that we're using for Blue Dragon. They also have a Enterprise Edition, a commercial edition that they sell. We're going to do the exact same thing with Blue Dragon. We'll have the open source edition, we'll have the commercial edition. I believe the other analogy, which is less perfect, is Red Hat, and what Red Hat's doing with the Fedora project, where Red Hat Linux is the commercial version that they sell licenses for. Fedora is the open source free version,
the
community edition. But the key point there is that Fedora is where the advanced development happens first.
Yes.
So Red Hat's model is new features get developed in Fedora, then they get folded back into the commercial products. We are going to do the same thing with Blue Dragon. So the open source version of Blue Dragon is going to become the development branch. So as we create new features for Blue Dragon, we're going to put them first in the open source edition in order to get community feedback, in order to let people use those features, and then as those features mature and stabilize, we'll fold those features back into the commercial products.
So rather than just keeping up with CFML in other engines, you'll be kind of pushing new areas, new ideas into the Blue Dragon engine, and then
well, I would say that innovation and new features have always been part of what we've done with Blue Dragon.
Yeah.
If you look and understand the history, certainly there's two components of feature development. So as we're planning Blue Dragon 8, for example, yes, we will look at the other CFML engines. Obviously, we will look at ColdFusion 8 and evaluate those features for inclusion. But in addition to that, we also look and listen to our customers and say, well, first of all, what do we think would be nice to have? What feedback have we gotten from our customers as far as what they would like? We view the open source version of Blue Dragon as another means of getting feedback for the types of features that people would like to see in Blue Dragon.
Okay, so essentially it's going to be kind of a complementary to your commercial suite of Blue Dragon engines and leading innovation. So how are you going to kind of control that open source process with revision control and things if developers want to start to contribute further than they currently do by suggesting bug or reporting bugs and so on?
Good question. Let me circle around that one.
Okay.
Before directly answering. First of all, I don't expect, at least initially, there to be a large number of outside developers wanting to contribute. I think that one of the reasons is simply a question of complexity. Blue Dragon is very complex product. There's over 1,200 classes, separate Java classes that comprise the product. So the time that it's going to take for any outside developer to come in and familiarize themselves enough with the workings to actually be able to make contributions is going to be fairly steep. Hopefully, or maybe someone will surprise us, but our expectation initially is that most of the development or all of the development on the open source version will be done by New Atlanta engineers. Okay. And so, however, when people, hopefully do step forward and want to make contributions, we will have a review process. It will be very similar. Any open source project, when you hear that, okay, anyone can contribute to Apache or anyone can contribute to Linux, well, actually getting code into Apache and into Linux is
within reason
is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
There are committees and there are individuals who are responsible for overviewing submissions, and certainly we'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
Initially, the New Atlanta engineers, myself included, we will monitor submissions. So if someone wanted to submit a change, we will have a mechanism for doing that. It doesn't mean that your change is automatically going to be accepted. What we're also looking to do is establish a steering committee, and we're soliciting people in the community who are interested in providing input into the management of this project. And this is not unusual for open source projects, to have a group of people whose job it is basically will be to answer these types of questions.
Yeah.
Right? To answer the question of what is the process for getting codes submitted to Blue Dragon. And so that's our intention.
Okay, that's pretty cool. When you do open it up, I assume you're going to be supporting that with a release of documentation to kind of cover those 1,200 odd classes. It's quite an undertaking.
Yes, as with. I'll give you one of my favorite quotes. This is a facetious, a tongue-in-cheek, but if you can read the code, then the code is self-commenting. If you can't read the code, then the comments won't help anyway. Unfortunately, like many software projects, the documentation is not as good as you would like it to be. So the best way to learn the code is to read the code. Well, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I would like to do is I've already approached the TerraTech people here, and at CF United in June, I would like to have a Birds of a Feather session. And one of the things that I would like to do with the Birds of a Feather is actually give an overview of the code for anyone who's interested, right? And I think even though the 1,200 classes is large, obviously there is some organization there, okay? And so once you understand the overall structure and organization, then obviously it becomes easier to find your way through the code. So we will try to help people find their way through, and we will put together how-tos or whatever the appropriate documentation. But anyone who's expecting to find a grand document that describes all of the code, unfortunately, is going to be disappointed, at least initially. But we understand that's an issue.
Okay. Quite a lot of open source projects tend to attract people whose aims aren't necessarily on the up and up. They're not necessarily, they use their access to the code to analyse the applications for security vulnerabilities, so on. How are you kind of gearing up to react to that sort of process where potentially Blue Dragon may be more of a target, certainly in the early days, if it's subject to review in that sense?
Well, honestly, I hadn't considered that question. That's a good question. I'm not sure that our response would be any different. Then obviously security is a concern during the development of Blue Dragon.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the fact that someone can see the code, does that make it more vulnerable? I'm not sure that it does.
It tends to make it easier for someone to find the vulnerabilities that may be in there.
Well, That's interesting. That if we become aware of those vulnerabilities, then our response is the same as it always is. We fix it, as quickly as possible. The danger, of course, would be that there would be a vulnerability that we would not be aware of. And again, how is that different with the source being opened or closed? I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yes.
I have to say that's an interesting question that we'll have to
Okay.
consider some more. You tossed me a curveball there.
I think that's about time we finish it then.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.